Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the deeply unsettling mechanics of a workplace trap. We're going to chart one employee's very personal step-by-step journey through manipulation, the sudden blurring of boundaries, and the severe professional fallout that followed. It's pretty much a textbook case of how power dynamics can be weaponized in the office, and honestly, the lessons here are absolutely critical for anyone navigating a corporate environment today.
So what actually happens when a promise of promotion becomes a personal trap? Let's dive right into this, because what starts as a completely normal professional discussion about your salary can sometimes mask an incredibly dangerous crossing of boundaries. We often think of workplace misconduct as super obvious or aggressive right from the get-go, but as we'll see, it frequently begins as something that looks exactly like career advancement.
We've got to start by getting to know our subject, Sabrina, and establishing her baseline innocence here. She's a 34-year-old employee who really relies on her job. She doesn't have a ton of money, but she takes a lot of pride in looking neat, doing excellent work, and then simply going home. Sabrina actively avoided extra attention. She wasn't looking for drama. She certainly wasn't looking for shortcuts. Her job was vital to her livelihood, and she just wanted to do it well.
All right, Section 1, the uncomfortable attention. Let's look at recognizing the early warning signs.
Notice the behavioral shift here. Sabrina's boss, Richard. He's 42, always in nice suits, and known as a really serious guy who rarely even cracks a smile. But suddenly, out of nowhere, he begins making daily visits to Sabrina's desk. And sure, he's asking about work, but he is lingering. He's staring in a way that makes Sabrina feel deeply, deeply uncomfortable. That unspoken physical presence, that is the first real red flag.
And then, here comes the bait. He literally stands at her desk and delivers this professional praise. You deserve more for your hard work. On the surface, that's exactly what any hardworking employee wants to hear, right? But Sabrina's instincts told her something was off. In fact, this single comment cost her sleep that night. She just turned it over and over in her head, questioning his true intentions.
Moving to Section 2, the dinner trap. This is how professional discussions turn personal.
This timeline brilliantly illustrates the slippery slope. Richard totally weaponized the promise of a salary increase. Think about it. First, he calls her into his office to formally praise her as one of the best workers, offering her a raise. But then, he suggests discussing the details over dinner. It goes from the office to a seaside restaurant where he's suddenly wearing casual clothes and eventually isolating her at his quiet apartment.
During this dinner, notice how the conversation strategically pivots. They started out talking about work, maintaining that illusion of a professional meeting. But very quickly, Richard shifts the focus. He asks about her dreams, her hobbies, and then, this is classic, he plays the vulnerability card. He starts talking about his own loneliness and how hard he works. He tells her she's different, making her feel special and totally emotionally disarming her right before taking her hand.
After successfully getting her from the restaurant back to his apartment and initiating a physical relationship, Richard seals the trap the next morning with this phrase, "Don't worry, Sabrina, I will take care of you." It's this paternalistic, comforting promise designed entirely to secure her trust and make her feel safe, completely ignoring the deeply inappropriate line that had just been crossed.
Which brings us to Section 3, broken promises and gaslighting. The sudden shift in power dynamics.
Now we see the absolute gaslighting Sabrina had to endure. Back under the harsh fluorescent lights of the office, Richard just flipped a switch. He became freezing cold, he ignored her, wouldn't even look at her in meetings, and when Sabrina finally gathered the courage to knock on his door and ask about that promised salary increase, Richard pulled a massive switch. He hypocritically accused her of being unprofessional, telling her she must not mix personal things with work, literally completely ignoring the fact that he was the one who orchestrated the entire thing.
By abruptly dismissing her with these exact words, Richard completely reasserted his hierarchical dominance. She had pointed out his hypocrisy, that he invited her to dinner, that he made the promises, but he simply shut her down. She walked out of his office with a broken heart and tears in her eyes, leaving her feeling entirely empty and just unable to focus on the job she used to love.
Section 4, the HR investigation. Because eventually private secrets become public.
Things escalate incredibly fast here. HR manager Miss Harper actually calls Sabrina in. Sabrina, remembering all those fake promises, decides she's just going to tell the complete truth. Predictably, Richard lies through his teeth and claims Sabrina is making the whole thing up. But the HR team uncovers the text messages he sent her, proving his guilt. Because of his lies and misconduct, Richard is immediately fired from the company.
Next up, Section 5, the unfair fallout. Let's examine the disproportionate cost to this subordinate.
You might think Richard getting fired is the end of the story, right? Well, actually, Sabrina lost almost everything all at once. Her life didn't get easier, it got incredibly hard. Her colleagues made her the scapegoat, calling her names and blaming her for Richard losing his job. It became a completely hostile environment. And then comes the ultimate betrayal. A few weeks later, the company fired her too. No goodbye. They just sent a letter saying she was terminated to protect the company's image.
Sitting all alone in her apartment, completely stripped of the career she valued so highly, she was consumed by this entirely misplaced anger. She was angry at Richard, for sure, but mostly, she was angry at herself. She kept asking, why did I believe him? Why didn't I stop it? It's such a tragic consequence of manipulation. The victim is left carrying the heavy guilt of the perpetrator's actions.
But there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Section 6, Finding True Self-Worth, Rebuilding Boundaries and Professional Identity.
Listen, Sabrina's explainer doesn't end in the ashes of that toxic job. After a grueling, incredibly stressful month of just firing off CVs, she finally lands a new role. And here, she found a truly healthy workplace. Her new boss, Mr. Terry, modeled exactly what a professional boundary should look like. He praised her hard work, but he only talked about work. For the first time in a really long time, Sabrina felt genuinely safe and comfortable.
This evolution right here, this is the absolute ultimate takeaway from the source material. Before this whole ordeal, Sabrina felt this subtle need for someone else to take care of her, which is exactly the vulnerability Richard exploited. But surviving this trap forced a massive, massive evolution. She realized she doesn't need false promises. She learned how to protect herself, how to stand up for what is right, and most importantly, she finally knew her own worth.
As we wrap up this explainer, Sabrina's story leaves us with a pretty stark reminder of corporate power imbalances. Yes, Richard lost his job, but Sabrina lost her reputation, her peace of mind, and her livelihood, all because the company wanted to protect its image. It begs the question we all really need to think about. When those professional lines blur and the trap is set, who is actually left footing the bill? Thank you so much for joining us, and stay sharp out there.